Welcome to the Practice Podcast, a show created by lawyers to help lawyers in life and business without all the complicated lawyer language. Let's welcome Bast Amron founders and your hosts, Jeff Bast and Brett Amron.
What's happening?
What's up?
How are you, Brett Amron? How are you really?
Really good.
Awesome. Love it.
So I have a question for you today.
I heard a rumor that you were going to ask me a question today.
Yeah, it was all over the social media sphere. If you were not a human, what animal would you be?
I'm going to go cormorant.
No idea what you're talking about.
It's a bird. You see them there, a lot of them in South Florida, that obviously flies, but it's also an excellent swimmer. They swim in. What's cool about this particular bird, and I may not be picking the best bird, but what's cool about this bird is, you know how when you look at water, if you take a glass of water and you put a pencil in it, the refraction bends the visual. So this bird, and like a lot of birds that dive, they're able to calibrate where the fish is underwater because it's not where it seems from above. And they fly in and are able to dart down and catch these fish underwater, making that calculation at incredible speed. So I just love the idea of being a bird for flying, but I'm torn with that question between the air and the sky. My first reaction is a dolphin, porpoise, which is probably my real answer because I'd love to be able to swim and communicate and also be a mammal, be a loving member of a family or of a pod. But I'm going with cormorant because I get to fly and swim.
I like it. Yeah. Good answer.
How about you? What's yours?
I like the bear. A bear can kind of go wherever it wants. Nobody's going to mess with a bear. It can live quietly in the woods or it can show itself. And it really isn't aggressive unless you do something to it or its children or its food supply. So I like a bear. I also thought of a mule, but I don't want to be a mule. I think people would say that about me. I think that the other word for mule, I think people would say. But in the mountains, mules are the form of transportation for a lot of material. That's how people move material in the mountains, like in the regions where there are no roads, there are no cars, there are no motorized vehicles. And the mule is a phenomenal tool, if you will, for the villagers to move things. And they can move incredible amounts of material and weight over incredible distances, no matter the elevation, the altitude, like it doesn't matter.
Wow.
So it's pretty impressive.
Our guest is nodding incredibly. You didn't know you were going to get a lesson here. By the way, while we're on this, I looked up cormorant. This is what the Google says. Cormorants are highly specialized aquatic birds famous for their unmatched diving ability and unique wing drawing posture. So you see them in South Florida a lot. Instead of floating high like a duck, cormorants ride low in the water. Their dense bones and heavy bodies allow them to dive to staggering depths, sometimes up to 150 feet, propelling themselves with their webbed feet and using their wings to steer.
Wow.
They're pretty cool.
That's pretty impressive.
I also have webbed feet. I have two toes that are joined.
And one more fact about the mule is most people don't know this, but they're very smart.
Oh, really?
They are very smart. Mules, donkeys, which are somewhat related, but they are very, very smart. Underestimated.
I like that question. You're creative. Now, I think it's time for us to introduce our guest because I'm really...
And hopefully there's a listener that is still listening to this podcast. They haven't turned it off yet.
I think we probably lost some lawyers and gained some scientists. Our guest today is Edward Montoya. Eddie has spent more than 3 decades helping clients navigate some of life's most challenging and high-stakes disputes. As the founding partner of Montoya Law, PA, he built a distinguished litigation practice handling complex matters involving aviation disasters, catastrophic injury, wrongful death, product liability, commercial disputes. But now he's bringing that experience to a new chapter through BridgePoint ADR, where he serves as a mediator and arbitrator. Drawing on his decades in the courtroom, he helps parties navigate conflict, assess risk, and work towards meaningful resolutions. And whether he's serving as an advocate or as a neutral, Eddie believes that understanding people is the key to resolving even the most complex disputes. Welcome, Ed.
Welcome, Ed.
Thank you, guys. Great to be here. That's a great introduction.
So you want? Oh, yeah. You like that?
Yeah. Do I need to send a wire transfer?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We're going to can that for you. We're going to send you just that. So in every mediation you have, you could just hit play.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea.
Just have that.
You should do
that.
that.
I like that. Just send it to everyone.
That's right. We'll waive any residuals for you on that.
Do you want to jump?
What's the answer to the question?
Jump in on the animal question.
So you guys have exotic animals and very practical animals too. I'm a world traveler, so I enjoy seeing coast to coast, international stuff. I think a shark,
nice.
It sounds simple, right? But it'll allow me to travel. I could be in the Pacific Ocean, visit the Fiji Islands somewhere, be in the Caribbean, maybe off the coast of the Dominican Republic, hanging out a little bit. Maybe Australia and hang out with the guys down there. Big Barrier Reef.
I like how I said to hang out with the guys. Like us and the other sharks are just hanging out in the water because everyone else wants to hang out with you. Nobody wants to hang out with you as a shark, right?
That's the other thing. No one's going to mess with you.
Only
There are
humans.
a couple of them. Yeah, humans. Well just
that's
stay
the
off
problem,
the coast, right?
You're right. They have a reputation, but they're really just minding their own business. They don't kill for sport. They kill to eat, like every other creature in the natural world. So
I think sharks are misunderstood, not cared for.
You're preaching to
Kind
the
of like
choir.
lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. A lot like lawyers, misunderstood. We're not predators. We just trying to help people, and they're just trying to swim and enjoy and survive.
That's right.
I like that answer. I'm with you. I love sharks. All right, Ed, how long have you been a lawyer?
I was sworn in 1993. So it's been a while.
Okay, yeah. We
it's been a
graduated
while.
same year. So are you somebody who always knew you wanted to be a lawyer? Tell us your origin story. How'd you get to that point?
Very interesting. So when I was a kid, my mom said I spoke a lot. Eddie,
That's good.
You just talk a lot. You need to calm down. Don't talk in class as much. I'm getting complaints from the teachers that you're talking a lot. I had incredible stories that I would tell my friends in school about my trips to Latin America because my parents were Latin American.
Well, you were grown up here in South Florida? Or?
So I was born in New York, interestingly enough. And this all happened up in New York initially. I'm sure it transferred down too. So I was born in Queens, Elmhurst Hospital, and grew up in Astoria, Jackson Heights. I think I did the Colombian route. If your family immigrates from Latin America or Colombia or one of the Latin American countries and you land in Queens, New York.
No, is that right? Yeah. Did you have siblings?
I have a brother, a younger brother, and I have 3 stepbrothers, or half-brothers, excuse me. But my youngest brother, Alfonso, and I grew up in New York, born and raised. So that was interesting.
So you traveled to Latin America a lot and you would tell stories?
Yeah.
Are we talking about elementary school, middle school, high school? Yeah.
So let me give you a little bit of background on that.
Please.
So my mom was from an island that belongs to Colombia. It's called San Andres, and it's in the Caribbean. On that island, I have family. I have aunts, uncles, at the time, grandparents as well. And whenever my mom wanted to get rid of us, she would send us down there to San Andres. She needed a break. My mom and dad needed a break. They're like, okay, let's send the kids down there. And I have to tell you, you ever watch a show Flipper?
Yeah, of course.
What the Keys was like back in the day? That's what San Andres reminded me of. I was hoping to see Flipper out there. I never saw him, but it was that environment. Everything was laid back, country type living or island living. You could run to the beach, swim all day long if you wanted to, horseback ride, walk around or ride bikes around the island. It was a very small island. It still is a small island. It's only 21 square miles. So you have 7 miles in length and 3 miles width. So you could do that. You could ride a bike around that island about an hour and a half. When I was a kid, it maybe took me 2.5 hours, but maybe as an adult, a little longer. And I had a fun time in San Andres, and so did my brother. So we would have all of these days where we would go swimming and not jet skiing, but on boats, hanging out, fishing. And I would come back to Queens, New York to tell my friends that I had spent all summer long on an island, fishing, swimming, boating. And they're like, wait a minute, we don't have any of that here. The closest we can get is to Rockaway Beach. And that beach is not as nice. So I had a lot of adventures on the island. Fantastic time growing up. And my family and I moved down in the early 80s to Miami. So that was a big change for me and for my brother. So we went from being city kids, if you will, to coming to a city that was just growing. At the time, Miami was just very young.
Sure.
It's not the Miami of today. It was really laid back a little bit. Later in the 80s, it became very robust. And in the 90s, it just exploded. But back when we arrived, it was a smaller town.
So
cocaine cowboys back then, yeah?
Oh, yeah. It was crazy back then.
So your mom told you that you spoke a lot and you were a storyteller. Did you know you were going to go to law school before you went to college?
So I think that was the first indication, the verbal skills.
Yeah.
The other one was that my mom had a very good friend. She had worked for a lawyer in New York. His name was Howard Diller. And Howard was a criminal lawyer in New York. he was actually one of the lawyers that represented the Central Park kids that got in trouble.
Central Park 5, yeah.
The Central Park 5. So he was one of their lawyers. And Howard, whenever he would come over, would tell us some amazing stories on the cases he would handle. And he just intrigued me. I was just always by the edge of my seat listening to Howard's stories on the trials and how he defended this person, got that person off. And he sparked my interest. And so as I was growing up, when I was in my teens, I really started realizing, hey, maybe this is something I would like. I found myself reading books on like F. Lee Bailey's book, Clarence Darrow, just books on lawyers who had achieved incredible things and had maybe made major change.
Right. Legal nonfiction.
Legal nonfiction.
That's
exactly.
Cool. All right. That's
exactly.
Cool.
So I think that inspired me and, just people around me, friends in the community that were going to law school and talking how exciting that was. First year, of course, brutal.
Did you go straight through from undergrad to law school or did you take a detour?
I took a detour. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to jump into law school right away. We had an illness in the family. My mom was ill. And so I was just a little concerned whether I should go right away. So I worked a couple of years before going to law school. During my second year, and I'll give you a little insight as to what I was doing, I studied economics undergrad and was thinking, okay, well, if my first plan of going to law school doesn't work, at least I have an economics degree and I can probably do something with that.
Which is what? What do you teach economics?
Banking, maybe? I was thinking banking. So one day I decided to apply to the Federal Reserve here in Miami and I got an interview. I actually got an invitation. I said, what? You're inviting me to interview with you? I went over to Doral, Northwest 36th Street and around 87th Avenue, give or take, interviewed and was offered a job a couple of days later. And I said, I'm here. So I did that for a couple of years.
So you worked for the Federal Reserve for a couple of years.
For a couple of years. I was an analyst in the check processing department. So I learned a lot about checks, why they bounced and how they're written out and quality of the paper, the coding, all of that stuff.
Was that a position where you were sort of making sure that transactions were legitimate? Were there certain transactions that were raised to you? Like, what were you doing and what was the point of your review of these transactions? I'm curious as an analyst.
No, that's a good question. When I first arrived at the Fed, I had that question too. What was going to be my role? I initially joined the analyst group, and their job was to determine the check error rates. In other words, why were certain checks not bouncing, but being rejected by the machines? And so it was a technical issue. They weren't sure whether it was the micron coding on the bottom of the check that was jamming the machines, whether it was a product issue, service issue, employee issue. They just didn't know. So I had to put on my investigative hat and go in and figure that out. I was trained on how to do that. I just remember I had many weeks of training, day and night. They have 2 shifts. They work 24
hours a day. At the Federal Reserve?
Well, I'm sure they have more than 2 shifts, but they have a day shift and a night shift. And I remember being on the night shift for a week, and it was just so hard on me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not used to working at 3 or 4 in the morning.
That does sound unappealing. I couldn't do it.
I remember having a conversation with my mom. She was in remission at that point. And I said, look, Mom, I really want to pursue my dream of becoming a lawyer. And she said, look, I want you to do that too. She says, why don't you do that? And so I started applying. I took the LSAT. I took the LSAT several times, I guess as many people do. And I started applying to different schools. And among them was Vermont Law School. A good friend of mine, someone from my undergraduate years, had been accepted to Vermont and only had great things to say about it. And I said, interesting. Maybe I should go visit this school. And I did. I took a flight up there. I said, well, first of all, how do I even get to this school, right? Do you drive up there? Do you take a flight to New York, Boston, where? I had to figure out the logistics on how to get there. And I figured that out. So I had to fly from Miami to West Lebanon, New Hampshire. West Lebanon is a city, if you were to look on a map, it's right next to Hanover, New Hampshire. Hanover and New Hampshire and Vermont are sister states, I guess. You could look at it that way. And they're adjacent to each other. And so I flew into West Lebanon, rented a car, and then drove to Vermont Law School. It was a very short ride. But as I'm driving to the school, the exit, I'm looking at these mountains, how gorgeous they are. Now, I flew up there in September, October during the change in foliage, and it was spectacular. The color, the vibrant.
We don't get that in Miami. We don't get the color change in South Florida, right? Yeah, for sure.
And I think that was the first thing that I noticed. I said, man, this place is gorgeous.
So this is how you decided on a career in law, because you like the color changing leaves. I like it. That's
well,
as good a reason as any.
That, right?
So you end up going there?
So I ended up going to Vermont.
Okay, cool.
And just loved my experience. I did an internship with the Department of Justice and the Civil Environmental Enforcement Division. I did that for several months. So I lived in DC and really enjoyed that experience. Met some good people at DOJ back in the day.
Cool.
Then came back to South Florida after I graduated. I had met a wonderful young lady who's now my wife back in college. And we had maintained our relationship throughout law school. She would come and visit me and I would go visit her. I would come down to Miami during breaks and visit her. And so we got married in 92, right around that time.
While you were still in law school, right?
Well, yeah, right after law school.
Right after law school.
Right after law school. Yeah. So we stayed here in the South Florida area. Yeah, the way I got started in law was during my first year of law school, my dad met an attorney. This is an interesting story. There was an attorney that was flying or that was traveling on the same flight as my dad. My dad was on a business trip to Latin America. And so he and this attorney and everyone else arrives at this airport. And my dad notices that this guy is carrying all these boxes. And he's like, wait a minute. And he taps the guy on his shoulder. He says, hey, why are you carrying so many boxes? And this person says, well, I'm an attorney and I'm on an aviation case. I represent families in an air disaster matter. And so I'm here with the files. I'm just meeting with my family clients. And my dad said, well, my son is in his first year of law school. Maybe you guys should meet.
Love it.
My dad's very direct.
It sounds like something my dad would have done, right? And something I would do for my kids.
For 100%.
For sure.
Yeah.
My dad's like...
For sure. That's what dads are for, yeah.
Yeah. The attorney, very nice guy. He says, yeah, sure. When he comes back down from Vermont, give him my card and we'll talk. So sure enough, I come down right after exams. It was my first semester. And my dad says, hey, I've got good news for you. I met an attorney and he tells me the whole story, how he met him and what the guy does. And he says, you got to call him. I said, okay, Dad, I'll give him a call. I just arrived. And I called him.
Is this someone we know, by the way? Aviation disaster?
You're getting to the punchline.
Let's go. All right.
So I pick up the phone and I call Carlos Velasquez. He's a very good trial lawyer here in town. He's actually up in Fort Lauderdale. And I interview with him. But I thought I was just interviewing with him. He brings in his other partners. He had 2 other partners at the time. And he brings them into the conference room and says, hey, this is Eddie Montoya. You know, he just finished his first semester at law school in Vermont. They say hello. Hey, let's go to lunch. So we go to lunch down the street. We start talking about law, about some of the cases that they're handling and some of the cases that we've read and the final exam. How did that go? Do you remember the long arm statute? Do you remember forum nonconvenience? Do you remember that from school? Absolutely, I remember that. That's fresh in my mind. And we just start talking about Latin America and how they're handling cases out of Latin America. At the end of this lunch, I'm standing up and saying, well, thank you guys. I hope to hear from you. Maybe this can work out. And if I could do a summer internship with you, it'd be great. And Carlos looks over and he says, well, as far as we know, you're starting in June. And I thought that was fantastic. That's really awesome. Cool guys. On the spot, they said, hey, come back. And that's how I started my legal profession. Maybe as a law clerk initially, but I remained with that firm for many years. Yeah. And 6 years later, I became a junior partner and then decided to move down to Miami because this was a Fort Lauderdale firm.
Right.
And I was traveling internationally a lot. So figured, okay, if I'm going to be traveling out of Miami, I might as well live in Miami. And so I was just going up to Fort Lauderdale every day. That was a nice little drive.
When did you start your own firm?
So I started my firm in 1999, October.
And same sort of practice.
Same sort of practice. So I learned how to handle those aviation cases, perhaps not in an expert manner like the way they had been handling them, but I had a good idea.
Did you grow the firm? Did you hire lawyers? Tell us about the trajectory of the firm.
So what was interesting is when I broke away from the firm, it was a solo practice. I started off small, and then I invited 2 other partners to come in. We handled catastrophic injury cases, product cases. I continued with the aviation work. And it was around that time, and I don't know if you guys remember, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a problem with the Ford Explorer, the Firestone tires.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
that combination of, without getting into the details of the case itself, was sadly a fatal combination. And so we represented at that moment many families. I had over 40 families that I was representing in about 10 or 15 rollovers.
Yeah, I was at Holland and Knight at the time. They were on the defense.
Yes.
I wasn't involved in those cases.
Okay, yeah. Holland and Knight was involved. You had Carlton Fields. You had a lot of big firms involved in that.
It must have been fun for you.
It was fun. I mean, it was scary.
Fun, but sad at the same time.
Sad.
Your practice generally is dealing with tragedy. So
sadly. And something that you've raised about the tragedy and how sad that is. And I've noticed over the years that losing a parent or losing a loved one, you're never prepared to lose someone in your life. But that experience opens up so much in you, and you understand people, you understand life, you understand how fragile we are in the world, in this life. And so when you see someone in that position, when you represent a client who's lost a loved one, or someone who suffered a catastrophic injury and cannot move, and you just look in their eyes and you know what they're going through, the pain, or the family, what the family's going through. And I think if I had to say what is one thing that distinguishes me is that I think I understand those families. I understand what they're going through. And when I represent them and fight for them, I feel like I'm fighting for them, not just for a compensation, not just for, hey, I am doing that because I want you to be secure. But at the same time, there's this sense of justice that comes with that. It's an awesome responsibility.
This job as lawyers, when we feel like we're seeking justice, it feels a lot better. Sometimes our clients are wrong and we're still fighting. And
I've had cases like those.
But when you're on the right side of justice, it certainly has a better feeling. And in those cases, sometimes we're dealing, with a bank or whatever. It's a file on someone's desk. But when we're representing an individual or a business or a family or whatever it is, it just feels different when you can make the human connection for the client. And I think we're most successful when we do that in court with judges or juries or whoever's the arbiter. When you can make it relatable and draw the human connection, I think that's when we're most successful too.
I totally agree with you. I think that human connection is so important, especially in this day and age when we are so busy. We're so concerned about what tomorrow will bring, or I've got to make my car payment, I've got to make my mortgage payment, I got to make sure my kids go through school. You have so many obligations in life as a person, and sometimes you lose that human connection with not only your family, but with friends. You start noticing that when your friends either move away or people are passing on, and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't have enough time.
Yeah, for sure. Oftentimes we don't appreciate it until we don't have it, or we lose a piece of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That to me is empathy. Having empathy for the people you represent, the situation they're in, and not to jump too far ahead, but you've now obviously pivoted to a mediation-focused practice. Where do you think that sort of empathy fits in a role as a mediator to help you and the parties kind of get to a spot to get a case resolved?
So that's a good question. The empathy or having empathy comes in many ways. For me, drawing upon my personal experience is always very important. Understanding the families that are involved in these mediations or the parties that are involved. Because, for example, you may have a plaintiff involved, and in that case, that person lost a loved one. But on the flip side, you have a carrier or a company involved that has certain needs. They also have the need for empathy or understanding. They need someone to listen to their side of the story as well. I think that my experience growing up, my litigation experience, but also just always trying to be true to myself, who I am, and just be the Eddie that everyone knows and not change Eddie, I think is the key to my empathy. Because I could have taken different roles down the road. I could have said, okay, I'm the really hard-nosed trial lawyer that will not listen to offers and just try every case. I don't know that that's the right thing to do. It's a disservice to your client. You're putting a lot of maybe unnecessary stress on yourself, but you're trying to prove a point to yourself. And I think a lot of those people, and I respect a lot of these trial lawyers that do that because I think it's necessary that you do go to court and try these cases. There are a lot of cases that demand that and require that. But there are some that perhaps through mediation, Brett, as you bring it up, you need to sit down and say, okay, let's look at what's happening here. What are the needs of the parties here? How do I now as a mediator look at these parties and empathize with their position. And I've got to be very careful, right? Because I can be empathetic, but there's a fine line in not becoming biased. And so I've got to keep checking myself in my mediations that I am treating the parties fairly, equally, and just really focused on trying to resolve the case for them or help them, assist them in resolving the case. So the term empathy is very important. It's part of that whole emotional intelligence aspect that we all know and love very well, because you're going to have parties, and I've seen this already, and I've experienced it myself as a trial lawyer, where you walk into a room and you have a plaintiff that you represent, and the plaintiff breaks down. They're emotional. They're either crying, they're angry. There are a bunch of emotions that come up in these cases. And so the question is, how do you handle that? How do you handle that while respecting, listening to those people? And they're fragile, because anything you say can trigger the next level of anger or the next level of an emotion. That feedback loop, that just me listening to myself and understanding me and carefully speaking to them, I think is important.
Yeah. It's solutions oriented, which sounds like that's how your practice was, and that's how your now mediation practice is. You're trying to find a solution. Like, people have a problem. And I think what happens with a lot of lawyers is they convince themselves that they're right. And sometimes they convince their client that they're right. Sometimes we're too good. We empower our clients, or we embolden our clients by convincing them that they're right and they want to fight. And what you want is an end to this.
That's right.
Right. And you want a solution. And so that's what I think makes good mediators.
I think we can be right. I think our clients can be right. And we don't have to dispute that with them. I think it's an and. You're right. And
right.
You want to keep fighting forever?
Right, yeah.
Or you want to come to a business solution or some solution that gets you some relief and move forward? The answer sometimes, as we know and that is no, I don't. I want to fight. I want my day in court.
Correct.
That's fair. But sometimes it's, you know what? That makes sense to me. What do you bring to the table, Ed, that another mediator may not? Like, what differentiates you? How are you trying to differentiate yourself with this practice? If listeners out there are saying, Eddie sounds like a great guy. He's got empathy. He worked at the Federal Reserve. Why should people call you? What do you bring to the table?
I'd like to think that most people that call me have had some sort of interaction with me and will understand who I am and have built a relationship with me at some point. But that doesn't happen all the time. I mean, there are a lot of people who call me and say, look, so-and-so has recommended you, and I'd like to know your availability for this week or next week. But I think what distinguishes me, and I think you see it or you hear it in the mediations, is that I treat people with respect. I don't demean anyone. I don't force a settlement onto the parties. I listen to them. I think it's very important to listen to them. Let them come to the conclusions, right? I think I'm very understanding, and I have a very maybe softer approach than some. I've been in mediations where you really feel that the position on the other side is being forced on you. And that's never a good feeling for a party, a lawyer for one of the parties, because what do you do if someone's forcing their position on you in front of your client? Do you say, I cave in. Okay, yes, I'm going to take that offer. No, you're going to double down.
Exactly.
You're going to double down. Yeah. So I use different techniques and strategies to bring the parties together. But Brett, to your answer, the advanced training. When I was thinking of becoming a mediator, and this started back in 2019, right before COVID, believe it or not, I had mediated a case with a dear friend, a very good mediator who mediates a lot of international aviation cases and domestic crash cases. His name is Michael Saboni. And Mike and I sat down after a mediation. We had a drink. And he said to me, have you ever thought about being a mediator? And I said, why? He said, because the way you handled this mediation, you were so collaborative, you were understanding, you understood the realities of the case. You have certain attributes that would make you an interesting mediator. And I said, well, how would I do that? And he says, well, let me tell you what I did. I did an LLM in arbitration and mediation at Pepperdine. And he explained to me that he had traveled to California and he was doing this over a couple of year period. I think it's 2-year period. And I said, Mike, I don't know that I can travel that way and do an LLM that way. And he says, well, let's keep talking. We continued talking. Then COVID happened. And you know what happened during COVID?
I remember it. You don't have to remind us.
Wow.
Wait.
Yeah.
What do you
He
speak of?
became a mediator.
What's this thing you're talking about? COVID.
Yeah, right? Everyone's forgetting. Like, what? COVID? It really was a game changer in my practice because we went from handling over 50 cases at a time to just a very core group of cases. We resolved a lot of them. But then I said, okay, this is the moment in my life. It's 2020. This is the moment in my life that I have to make a decision. Do I continue down this track, in the litigation track, or do I now make that change or pivot to mediation? And I did. I did the pivot. And what I did was I looked around to see what programs were out there, LLM programs, master's programs, and I found a master's program up in New York at Columbia University. And I picked up the phone and I called the people up there and I said, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. I don't know if this master's fits in with what I'm hoping to do here. We spoke for over an hour and I was very convinced at the end of that yes, this was the right program because it wasn't just a matter of, it wasn't a traditional LLM program where you were going to be reading case law and combing through cases. And this was something else. This was understanding people from a humanistic standpoint, from a philosophical, from a psychological perspective. It's understanding you first. And then once you understand yourself, you can understand others.
Mind's blown. Call Ed now. Operators are standing by. That's pretty cool. And we know how the story ends. He's a mediator. He's an arbitrator. He's settling cases. All kinds of cases?
All kinds of cases.
If you have a dispute and you need somebody to help you resolve it, because he's not going to resolve it for you. I guess you could if you're an arbitrator.
I can manage it.
For a mediator, want help settling it, Ed's your guy. Ed, this has been fun.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Always good to see you, Christina. And if you are out there, listener, I'm talking to you. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell us in the way you tell us by giving us a review. Hopefully it's 5 stars, but if not, we still want to hear your review.
Tell us what kind of animal you want to be.
Tell us what animal you want to be. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
For more information on this show and other resources, visit bastamron.com and connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at Bast Amron.